Good afternoon and welcome to the Sam Lacrosse Show. Happy Monday. On November 18th of 2024, what appeared to be a Nazi march kicked off in the docile urban hub of Columbus, Ohio. That afternoon, cloaked men were seen walking through an otherwise normal short North Street carrying swastika emblazoned black flags. In addition to the flags and the hoods they were wearing, they were seen shouting slurs at people, among them being the N-word, among several other terrible words. The march was condemned across the state of Ohio immediately. Quote, "This type of behavior cannot stand," said nearly every single stuffed stoot that had some prominence in my home state. National leaders took to social media to say how abhorrent this behavior was, a fact that was obviously true. Shaming took place all over our communication channels. Even then, 4 years after George Floyd, we still had a quote-unquote long way to go. But what was not said was something far more strange. A Nazi rally in Columbus, Ohio? Really? I lived in Columbus for 4 years and saw, thankfully, a relatively low amount of neo-Nazis. Meaning, of course, I saw zero neo-Nazis. Columbus, even though laden with crime, is a very nice place. Contrary to what our chattering class believes and says, white nationalism isn't that popular in our country. Meaning, of course, it's not popular at all, and thank God for that. So what should we make of this? Should Columbus, Ohio have been placed on a list of cities across the United States where quote-unquote white nationalism reigns as the supreme ideology and doctrine? Should we put tracers on e-commerce purchases in the nearby townships of Dublin and Grove City for propagandistic portraits of David Duke and Oswald Mosley? Should we press local book retailers in the recent sales uptick for Mein Kampf? That's what our elites would probably like the local officials to have done, but they didn't. They mostly ignored it as an absurd case of utilizing your First Amendment rights, which is probably the best way to describe it. But what many began to believe in the aftermath of the Nazi march in Columbus, Ohio, and what I believe now, is that something completely different was actually happening. Think about the context here. Donald Trump, who had been called a Nazi every single day for the last decade, had been just reelected president. Young men, most of them white, had just fought back politically for the first time in a long time. J.D. Vance, the face of that group of young men, was the heir apparent to the Make America Great Again movement. These all tell a story. Everything is connected. What that story is, what that connection leads to, is, as always, up to the person who tells it. If you want people to feel on edge, if you want people to become radical and swing to the fringes, there is one tactic that always works: fear. If you want to motivate someone to believe something, do something, or follow something, scaring the daylights out of them would be a great start to do so. Given this, and given the context, ask yourself a question. Who would have the most to gain from a sham of a neo-Nazi rally in Columbus, Ohio, 2 weeks after the most consequential election in recent history? Answer: the United States government. The federal government participating in government psychological operations is nothing new. They have changed their packaging, but their intent behind them is exactly the same. And their intent behind them? To cudgel and to scare the citizens of America into believing something that serves their ends, not the ends of the people that elect them. The clear tell of how to tell if you're experiencing a psyop is the absurdity of it. Think about all the things that have been turned out to be completely fabricated over the years, ones that all of our experts told us were set in stone. Donald Trump gets peed on by hookers employed by the Kremlin. Don't look at Joe Biden falling upstairs. He's fine. People walking to the Capitol unarmed and saying prayers for police officers are insurrectionists. The deadliest pathogen in 100 years came from a bat. The list of these goes on, of course, in far greater detail than any one of us would like to remember. The commonality between all of them, other than the fact that they're completely fake: absurdity, foolishness, ridiculousness. Things that you can tell in plain sight, but get swept under the rug by everyone who wants you to believe otherwise. None of them are true, but yet all of them are driven home with such effort and force that many, unfortunately, believe that they are true. Psyops, starting with MK Ultra leading all the way up to, quote, Joe Biden as sharp as a tack, reveal a lot about what powerful people in our society believe. About us, about our culture, about what they value. To understand them, we must dissect them and point them out in all of their absurdity in turn. Nick Fuentes is currently the biggest psyop that is happening in America right now. Fuentes, the head of the infamous Groyper movement online, has become one of, if not the fastest riser in cultural commentators in our country. The 27-year-old Fuentes has been a lightning rod for controversy for several years, leveraging provocative talking points about every uncomfortable topic Americans don't want to talk about. His goal is to make the American right a quote-unquote reactionary party. Fuentes first started talking about streaming, started first started by starting a streaming show in 2017, cleverly titled America First, while attending Boston University. That same year, he attended the fateful Charlottesville, quote, Unite the Right rally, which still haunts Donald Trump to this day. Fuentes, apparently after receiving some kind of a threat, dropped out of college to keep streaming full-time. And over the course of the next decade, Fuentes' following grew massively. That following, known as the Groypers, were primarily of one group: young, disaffected white men who felt completely backdoored by America. They didn't have a strong father in the household. The only place they could find community, the one place that they felt that would accept them, was the internet, where they could commiserate about how awful their lives were by pointing the finger at everyone, taking no responsibility for just how stupid they have been in the decision-making and trajectory of their own lives. That said, every cult, every following, every movement of this kind needs a charismatic leader to galvanize them. And Fuentes was the perfect man for the job. The newly named Groypers needed a face for their bitterness, for their cruelty, for their resentment that so defined their antagonism towards everything that they view as kicking them while they're down. Fuentes was the perfect man for the task. He was ambitious, angry, brutal, charismatic, handsome, and young. If you saw him while walking down the street, one would be tempted to believe him to just be a frat douchebag, a Chad who had just struck out with another Stacy at apple pie chai latte down the street. Very little knew that Fuentes, in demeanor and personality, was the exact opposite of a frat douchebag. Instead of being the one flying the banner of the future wannabe big shots of America, he was the one who was standing outside with a can of gasoline and a lighter, eagerly awaiting an opportunity to burn all of it down. So this begs a question. What exactly do Fuentes and the Groypers want to quote-unquote burn down? The answer is both simple and terrifying. Everything that quote-unquote oppresses them. One that has supposedly prevented them from living the lives they want to live. Even though I've come to loathe the term woke right, as we all should, they are perfect monikers of this description. Wokeism outsources all responsibility to something outside of your control, to something that quote-unquote oppresses you, no matter whether it's Christianity, Western civilization, or white people. Fuentes and his Groypers did the exact same thing in the inverse. In stepping up to the plate and striving for positions of leadership in companies or politics, for example, they blamed the Jews. Instead of doing a self-audit and understanding why women aren't receptive to their advances, they blamed feminism. Instead of doing what they could to become self-sufficient on their own 2 feet and gaining greater control of their income, they blamed neoliberalism. It should be noted that Fuentes and the Groypers, although very much in the wrong on multiple fronts, have become such a cultural force for a reason. They're not totally wrong about their complaints. Should we ask questions about how influential the nation of Israel is in controlling parts of our government and institutions? Yes. Is modern womanhood in dire crisis in need of severe course correction and reform? Yes. Is it harder in some ways now than ever to keep up with inflation and own a home? Yes. But that attitude of defeatism and nihilism gets you nowhere. In fact, it makes the problem worse. Fuentes and the Groypers are not an inspirational group of people, mostly because they're not an impressive group of people. Outside of Fuentes, who deserves some degree of credit for building an audience at least, the Groypers attract the most unimpressive and unmasculine group of men out there. They're far from the men who show up in suits at a Jordan Peterson event, for example, or even at a Scott Galloway lecture, pen and paper at the ready. And this is one of the biggest tells of the fraudulence and shallowness of the Groypers and Fuentes himself. Even though I have my issues with Scott Galloway, he is and still, in my view, the best chance the American left has at some archetype of constructive masculinity. He inspires men to be better, to take control and responsibility of their lives, and to do better for themselves in all possible angles, in a way much like Peterson does. Fuentes and the Groypers hate this mentality, including that, by the way, of Andrew Tate, who should, in theory, be all in on their philosophy. But they don't. Why? Because at the end of the day, Galloway, Peterson, and Tate all have the same view. The determining factor in your success in your own life is you, not the Jews, not women, not Israel, not Joe Biden, not anybody. You. Outsourcing that control is akin to a death sentence. The Groypers and their leader, Nick Fuentes, don't like this because they know who they truly are. A group of unattractive, unemployed, and unimpressive losers who have elevated a cult leader who preys on their resentment to quote-unquote speak for them. They have no answers as to why their life sucks because they know the actual answer themselves is far too terrifying for their own delusion and identity to let run rampant. But back to that fearless leader, Nick Fuentes, and the original point of our discussion of Psyops. The biggest tell to see that one is being run is the absurdity of what is elevated. The interesting thing about Nick Fuentes is that everything about him is absurd. The way he talks, the way he speaks out of one side of his mouth and then the other, the way he pretends to be some kind of America First MAGA type but really isn't. What does this tell us? Well, put simply, Nick Fuentes himself is a psyop. Nick Fuentes is an operation that is currently being run on America from broader forces. He's like Jeffrey Epstein or Diddy. He's not a real person. He's simply a construct, a plant, someone who serves no other purpose than to be some face of some broader, more nefarious scheme. He stands for everything and nothing at the same time. He is a walking contradiction, someone who is only built for one purpose, to destroy. This was wisely pointed out by Jason Whitlock a few weeks back, who, due to the Groyper swarming nature of anyone who says anything critical about their dear leader, had the gall to call Fuentes out on the core flaw in his demeanor. Fuentes has repeatedly called himself both a Christian and Catholic nationalist, believing that a Catholic theocracy, apparently over America, is the only way that the country can right the ship. I'm not a Catholic, obviously, but I can understand some of Fuentes' points. I'm a Christian. America was founded on Christian values, most specifically Protestant values, by the way, but that's neither here nor there. I am fully on board with the idea that if America were to right the ship, installing a Christian value system would not only be great, but the only sustainable solution to that problem. But since everything Fuentes does is completely and totally false, there is no way for him to back this up. For someone who claims to be a Christian, particularly when the supposed, quote, rise in Catholicism is all the rage, he never says anything, nor does he do anything that reflects Christian values. In fact, I would go so far as to say that he uses every single non-Christian talking point to back up his arguments. For example, he has argued before that non-white races are genetically inferior. Where is that anywhere in the scriptures? Hint for those who don't know, nowhere to be found. He has argued that groups of people he doesn't like are not of equal human value. Is that really what Jesus preached? Absolutely not. Does the Catholic Church really believe that the Jews are the bane of all existence on the face of the planet? No, because the answer to that question is sin, not people hailing from the Holy Land. You can tell further Fuentes' fraudulence by his response to this counter-argument from Whitlock, as well as people like Candace Owens. Instead of responding directly to these claims, he doubles down, throws a temper tantrum, calls them liars and racial slurs, instead of sticking to his guns and backing up what his actual theology is, instead of frog memes and shallow internet talking points, and more temper tantrums. This is because deep down, Fuentes knows that he is not building anything. The Groypers may think that he is, but he himself knows that this is completely false. Instead, the only person of Nick Fuentes is to deconstruct, to tear things apart, to set the world on fire as his gang of minions watches it burn behind them. Which leads me to the ultimate conclusion of all of this, one that people are finally starting to catch on to. Nick Fuentes is a federal asset that is used as a front for a government operation. I don't know exactly how or why Fuentes is a psyop, and I'm not claiming to, but I know what I see. And what I see is the following. A young, disgruntled incel online who is largely believed to be gay by not small parts of his subculture. He does not do anything constructive to anything he claims to support, not to MAGA, nor Donald Trump, nor conservatism generally. He has no allies. He only flames people and does nothing to build them up. What this tells me is that Nick Fuentes is clearly a government asset that has been tasked with the mission of ripping apart MAGA from within. Think about it. Donald Trump had dinner with him and Kanye West 3 years ago when he was only 24 years old. He has gotten the ear of everyone from Tucker Carlson to Destiny. He is immensely popular with young men, the seminal group who turned the tide in favor of Donald Trump. If you're the U.S. government looking for your next honeypot operation in the vein of Diddy or Jeffrey Epstein, Fuentes makes himself about as prime of a target as you can ask for. And he's succeeding, at least in some ways. Fuentes and his movement has successfully taken our eye off the ball, off of the important changes needing to be made on several occasions. He is the shiny object that distracts everyone from the dire conversations needing to be had in favor of stupid ones that do nothing to move the ball forward in any meaningful fashion. He is not America first. He is not MAGA. He is not helpful or useful in any way at all. Rather, he is only useful to the people he's actually beholden to, the U.S. government and their enemies, us, the value-driven people of the United States of America. So what should we do about this? Nick Fuentes and the Groypers are not going anywhere, no matter how much we may want them to. First, we need to understand the game we now find ourselves wrapped in. This is a psyop. We've been lied to about Nick Fuentes and what he actually means. He's a federal agent meant to distract us. and he'll be far from the last one. What is far more important than someone stupid like Nick Fuentes is what happens after someone stupid like Nick Fuentes. We need to be on guard. We need to be aware of what's going on and what we can do to protect ourselves from the pull of Psyops. That's what this episode is going to be about. Psyops and how to stop them. Know how to do so and your life will be sane. Don't, and your life will devolve into the insane. And at the end of the day, we all know which choice is the better one to make. Okay, so psyops are being run all the time. And if you're not aware, you will be aware very, very quickly. This is kind of how this stuff works. And so we need to understand how psyops work, how psyops operate, how they are run, who runs them, etc., in order to comment, or not to comment, but to stop them effectively. And so what we're going to be doing throughout this entire show, and I'll use this as a kind of a blueprint example of this. So the biggest thing about these operations that have been run on the American people for a very long time, and on you for a long time, on me for a very long time, is that if you're not aware of them, you'll get caught up into one. And you probably have, if you're being honest with yourself. You've probably gotten caught up into multiple. I know I have, for example. And so you will not be able to spot all of them because, unfortunately, there are just too many of them. They're being run all the time by various groups of people. A lot of people want to see things happen. The only way to really have those things happen is to make sure that they are just being run in the clandestine forces behind the back, usually with the government, other things kind of operating. And this is going to be kind of tinfoil hatty, kind of conspiracy theory-ish, but it's not, because these are actually real and they matter and we should talk about them. So what the goal of this episode is for you to be mentally competitive enough to see them happen before they completely start to dominate the discussion and the conversation. That's the biggest thing. And so really what I've noticed in terms of the psyops, the operations that have been run by the government, by other forces in the world, they generally follow a 3-step playbook. And the one I really want to pay attention to, the one that really I think has been, well, all of them are vicious, obviously, like psyops do no one any favors except for the people that run them, obviously. But I want to talk about January 6th because January 6th needs a closer look. And it's been over 4 years now, and there's been a lot that we still don't really know what happened on January 6th, by the way, but we know what did not happen. There were lies by the United States government, that whole show trial sham of the January 6th Commission and everything, where they did not disclose there were, by the way, 27, I believe, FBI agents in the crowd. They had officers letting people into the Capitol. You know, they assassinated a person that was going through, Ashley Babbitt. They had no justifiable ways to use force in terms of violent action to kill a person, kill a woman, by the way, on the property of the United States government, which we own as the citizens of the country. So this was a massive psychological operation. A lot of people got hurt by this. And I'm not saying that because I'm a MAGA guy, I'm a Trump guy, I am, but it's a very instructive lesson to learn how these things are operated. So the first step of how to run a psyop is you attach yourself to a lightning rod of a narrative. So power, entrenched interests, of which always come psyops. Psyops are always run by entrenched power positions to make sure that people are being distracted and not honing themselves in on something or another. So power and power systems are always threatened by disruptors. When anyone comes in and says, I want to change things, or I want to adjust the narrative, or I want to do X, Y, and Z thing to make sure that, everything is set in stone for whatever this thing might turn out to be, that is a threat to institutional power systems. And they don't like that. And they want to make sure that they're dispensing with everything that is there. And so disruptors, no matter what field this is in, whether it's political, whether it's business, whether it's culture, whether it's your school, whether it's, your family, whatever, disruptors always come in the form of a lightning rod type of person or a narrative surrounding it, or both. So basically, this person, this disruption, comes in the form of a different angle on this, a different person saying the thing, whatever that might be. They come into an entrenched narrative about something that has been existing for a while, and they say, hey, I don't think this thing is working. I don't think that, this is going to be the beneficial way to move forward in this way versus another. And then people start to freak out because they're like, oh, wow, that might have a point to it. This might have a point to this thing or whatever. And so then comes the PSYOP. The PSYOP comes immediately after. PSYOPs are run because the opposition to power has to be loud by definition. And so the opposition force, the disruption of this entrenched power system, this entrenched narrative, is loud because it has to be to topple an entrenched narrative or power structure or whatever it's going to be. And so what they do is not necessarily quash the narrative because that would put them on the defensive, but instead they attach themselves to an inherently inflammatory narrative by design. So they give it not credence, they don't really necessarily give it permission, but they don't necessarily say shut up about everything. And they do say shut up about it, but after, if they want to run an op on it, they kind of say, hey, we're going to inflame and puff up this narrative that someone is saying. So, for example, in January 6th, the biggest thing that led to January 6th was that Donald Trump said the 2020 election was stolen, that the government rigged the election, that Joe Biden rigged the election, that everything was there. Still, it has not been proven. I have my own opinions on this, but that was the claim that Donald Trump made. They stole the election from me. We actually won. They puffed up the ballot boxes. They rigged the machines, whatever it wanted to be. There was a big thing with the voting machine systems and the giant Fox News lawsuit in Dominion. And Rudy Giuliani I don't know if he got thrown into prison, but he got indicted for this, I believe, or whatever. But he got, ran off, whatever. And so basically, this was the narrative with January that led to January 6th. And so there was this thing, Joe Biden wins the presidency in 2020, and Donald Trump says he actually didn't win the election, he stole it, and then a lot of people got riled up because Donald Trump is a really, really aggressive following in this way, in terms of people aren't violent, although some of them were, obviously, in some ways, but most of them weren't. But in terms of when someone attacks Trump, people defend Donald Trump very aggressively. I talked about that a couple weeks ago in our idolatry episode. It's unhealthy, I think, in some ways, because we should never be attached to a politician to that much of a degree where we're saying, hey, we're going to be, with you for anything, everything. If you tell us how high the bridge is, we'll jump off it, whatever. And so, but that was the claim. So the op, it starts to be run when they attach themselves to a narrative and they say, you know what? Donald Trump says the election was stolen. We are going to basically say, hey, we're going to acknowledge this. Look at this crazy guy saying this thing. That's how it starts. That's how the foundation is laid. The second step of how PSYOPs are run is that the people running the op, they identify a bad guy. So all PSYOPs need to have something to elevate for destruction, most notably the disruptor movement that's happening. So all ops are run for the purpose of elevating the thing they want to destroy and then obliterating it. So there must be a bad guy for people to rally towards, or else the people who get caught up in the op will have no way to justify their behavior. Meaning, they cannot get away with what they want to do, their nefarious actions, their lies, their actions, etc., without justifiable cause, quote unquote justifiable cause to do so. So they must paint red an enemy of whatever their position is and say, hey, this is the bad thing, this is the bad person, these are the bad people, and we must stop these people. That is what they say on this. And so there must be an enemy for this for two reasons. One, to play this little bait and switch game, get the actual argument off of the topic, off of the concept, and onto a person. It's a us versus them type mentality. They don't want it to be about the issue, the people running the op. They want it to be focused on another person. There must be an enemy for that reason, and there must be an enemy because someone must pay the price for the means necessary to do this. So the purpose of a PSYOP is to completely disrobe, overthrow an opposition movement, to basically discredit, shame, put out to pasture a certain motive that someone wants to put into that position. So basically what this means is that in identifying a bad guy and identifying an enemy, you both, one, give yourself a target that you can go after, and two, you basically have something to say, hey, we're going to punish this person when the op is completed and this bad thing happens, and we're going to put that person out to pasture, basically. And that's what happens with all PSYOPs, and that's what happens with January 6th. So basically, the enemy, ironically, the U.S. government chose with January 6th was not really Donald Trump Even though Donald Trump later got indicted for a lot of things, and they went after him with all the lawfare stuff and things like that. But the enemy was not Donald Trump. Because you think about who really paid the price for January 6th, and it was the people. It was the people that were at the Capitol. Donald Trump didn't get shot. Donald Trump didn't get thrown into jail without, bail or the ability to have a trial. He didn't have habeas corpus suspended. So and this is what makes January 6th particularly nefarious, is that the U.S. government targeted the people at the Capitol. And I want to make it very clear, not the people that were actually throwing stuff at police officers, not the people that were bashing in windows, but the people that walked into the Capitol. And by the way, you can walk into the Capitol pretty easily on any other day. You can. You're a citizen. You can do that. It's government property. You can walk into a government building. It's ridiculous. And it might be something where it's like, hey, you can't come in here, just go out, whatever. But to have the federal government, as we'll see in a couple minutes, come down on them that hard, to throw grandmothers in prison, to do all these other, it was ridiculous. And so, again, not the notable people at the Capitol, like Donald Trump, Nick Fuentes, Alex Jones, did not get thrown into prison for this, although they've all been come after it for various different reasons. I'm trying to think who else is there. Like even the QAnon guys, like the Watkins, I believe is their last name, Ron Watson, or Watson, Watkins, whatever. Like they didn't get thrown into prison. It was all the innocent people that showed up for the Stop the Steal rally or whatever it was going to be. And so they said, hey, this group of violent insurrectionists, militia, protester people with the don't tread on me flags and everything, they're the enemy. And they need to be punished for this. They're an angry mob. They want to overthrow the government, and we're going to target them. So that was the enemy they painted. And that was the enemy they kind of identified throughout the entire thing. Which leads to the third step. So the third step of how to run a successful psyop is you throw that enemy under the bus as a sacrificial lamb, an example. So when the op is done, when the op is completed, there must be a sacrifice for the success of the operation. So it is not only that you need to identify the enemy and say that these are bad people. You need to crush them. You need to punish them excessively. It cannot be a small punishment. You must come down on them with the force of 1,000 suns. So a group must be crushed by the people running a psyop in order to make sure that the psyop is run properly. Because the people that are running the op, the people in positions of authority, the people that are in positions of power, they want to hold on to that power. They don't want to let it go, which is why they're wanting to run this op to crush the opposition. So they must squash their opposition in order to claim that power. You'll see this all over the place. And this is where it's like they don't have mercy for their opposition. They don't have mercy for their enemies. People get crushed by psyops all the time, and no one cares. And so the people that got crushed inside of January 6th were the innocent J6ers, the people that walked into the Capitol, that got thrown into prison, shot, killed, thrown into jail without trial, no due process, no habeas corpus, no anything. And people were thrown in prison to rot for 3 years. Like unspeakable. Like the fact that happened in America, hundreds of people got thrown into prison as quote unquote insurrectionists for walking into a government building. It's ridiculous. It's un-American. It's a stain on our country that we did that to our own people, that was allowed to happen to our own people. And again, if people threw a rock at a police officer or bashed a window or whatever, but 3 years in a federal jail without a trial, like really? And by the way, no one paid attention to this because why? They painted them as the enemy. They were the bad people. They were the insurrectionists. No one cared about them because that's how an op works. You dehumanize people. You label them as the enemy. They must be destroyed. Who got destroyed? Probably lower income, working middle class people who wanted to go to a political protest because they felt that the election was stolen or that Donald Trump was being treated unfairly. And Donald Trump was the only one that had ever stuck up for them their entire lives in politics. And what was their reward for doing that? Thrown right into prison. No trial, no bail, no right to an attorney, no due process, no habeas corpus. One of them got assassinated. Ashley Babbitt got assassinated by a armed police officer who randomly shot her, killed her in front of everybody else. People got beaten, crushed, thrown into jail, no trial, no due process. And no one batted an eye. No one batted an eye. And it's shameful. It's shameful that that was allowed to happen inside of our country. And again, I'm not for insurrection. I'm not for violence, particularly in a government building, but that was a psyop. And I think people are finally starting to realize it was a psyop. And we should, because we need to learn from this. So psyops are running those 3 steps, ending with crushing your opposition. And if your opposition isn't crushed, you didn't run the psyop well enough. So whenever you want to see if a psyop is run, look at how devastating the damage is and the fallout is. You'll find out really quick. So Bari Weiss is in the news. This is just so perfect for this the context of this episode. So Bari Weiss who is I believe the editor-in-chief. She's the founder, and I believe the editor-in-chief of the Free Press, which is a glorified blog on Substack, which has become a truly independent institution of news. And I don't want to demean Bari at all, even though I really can't stand Bari Weiss. And we'll get to that in a second. But so this news broke from Puck News, which I think is actually a pretty good outlet the other day, that said Bari Weiss is currently in talks with CBS News. CBS News. If you want to, Bari Weiss's whole thing, the reason why Bari Weiss got really famous is that she left the New York Times, the paper of record, quote unquote, because she didn't want to be a part of the mainstream apparatus anymore. And now, apparently, Bari Weiss is in talks to sell the Free Press to CBS News. CBS News, again, the most vanilla, white bread type of mainstream news organization out there. And she's going to apparently sell the Free Press, dump the Free Press, the institution she spent the last probably, 7 or 8 years building, for I've heard upwards of $250 million. I've heard that's not going to happen, but I've heard the low end is $100 million for the Free Press, which is incredible. It's incredible. And it's a really big it's a really big deal for independent media. It says a lot about where CBS is, but I think it says more about what Bari Weiss is. I heard I think this might have been on Emily Jashinsky, who I love, was commenting on her show After Party a couple days ago, and I saw a YouTube comment where it says, when the Free Press became the bought press. I thought that was really funny. But anyways, so the big thing about this Bari Weiss and apparently the deal is that Bari Weiss is going to have complete editorial authority over CBS News. And so that's a huge development. And so we'll get to that in a second. But really the upset at Bari Weiss is coming from really 2 sides. It's coming from, one, the establishment side, which, going back to the point I mentioned about Bari now having editorial control, over CBS News, they are very upset, the people working at CBS News, that a quote-unquote independent journalist like Bari Weiss is going to come in and control everything, which she is, because Bari Weiss has wanted this for a long time, and we'll get to that in a second. Bari Weiss has never wanted to just be a lone wolf type of podcaster, journalist type person. That's not how she's wired. It's never been how she's wired. She's always wanted this moment for herself. And so CBS is terrified, because I think Bari is going to go in there and she's just going to wax people left and right. You're fired. She's going to become Trump, honestly. Fired, out, whatever. And people are shaking in their boots over there, which to some degree makes me happy, because CBS News is a despicable organization, obviously, and that's, they deserve to be cleaned out, but I just would prefer if it was something other than Bari Weiss doing it. But anyways, and so the big thing, I think, and this is the thing that bothers me, and I think bothers a lot of people in independent media and independent journalists, people in the space like me and other people that are more prominent, obviously, but independent journalists view this, and I view this, as selling, or independent journalists rather, let's stick to the journalism side. They view this as selling out. Oh my gosh, Bari is she's giving up her integrity, giving up her independence, whatever. Like, she's selling out, she's cashing out, taking a fat check and running away, whatever. And so you have kind of this double-edged sword of criticism aimed at Bari Weiss. And apparently, according to the Puck News piece, this is about maybe like a week ago now, around a week ago, where the deal was on the 1 yard line. Is what I forget. Someone, if they want to go down in the comments, drop the article or comment the Puck News reporter. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the guy's name, but he said the deal was on the 1 yard line. So this is going to happen probably within the next couple of weeks, I would think. It's just kind of about the raw number at this point. And that's interesting because what do you value the free press at? And I almost worked for the free press. I applied to a couple jobs at the free press to be a reporter, to be a writer for them, a bunch of other things. And so Bari basically bootstrapped the free press from nothing. She built it off of Substack. It's now in a different form and fashion. And so I was thinking, like, where is the value from the free press going to come from? Like, why are they valuing this at $100 to $250 million? And, I thought about like their email list and their connections to different, like a lot of very influential people read the free press. So a lot of big contacts inside of there could be influential to CBS News who might want to do a whole rebrand of whatever. We'll see how that goes. I don't know how that's going to happen. I don't really care, to be honest. But so you have the criticism from the establishment. You have the criticism from the independent folks. But I don't think Bari Weiss is doing either, personally. I don't think she's selling out, and I don't think that she's going totally mainstream because I don't think she's going to, become this massive independent force inside of CBS. And the reason I don't believe either is because Bari Weiss was never truly independent. She never was truly independent. Never. Bari Weiss has never had a single countercultural thought in her entire life. She may have in comparison to the other elite positions of authority over at the New York Times or something, or the Wall Street Journal where she worked at before, but her positions are the most mainstream, again, white bread vanilla you can ever ask for. Like on everything from Israel to foreign wars to LGBTQ policy, they're not unorthodox at all. She is as mainstream can get. She's not an independent thinker whatsoever. Again, I go back to the mask off moment on Joe Rogan where she called Tulsi Gabbard an Assad toady. And she called her basically, a massive, she's Tulsi Gabbard is an appeaser, like she wants, you want the terrorists to win, like that kind of thing. And again, LGBTQ stuff, she's fully into that. She's very supportive of Israel, all of the mainstream opinions, all the foreign wars. She's a total neocon. She wants to bomb everywhere in the Middle East, all over the world. She wants to be in the Ukraine, all that kind of stuff. So I never had a good feeling about Bari Weiss. Even when I was following Bari Weiss early, I said, when she left the New York Times back in, I think 2018, 2019, this is when this kind of happened. And, she goes on Rogan and she's talking to, Douglas Murray and a couple other people. I'm like, I don't know about this woman. I really don't know about this woman. I don't trust her. I never trusted Bari Weiss. And so now I think this is the second mask off moment. If the Rogan one was the first one where she basically came after Tulsi Gabbard and called her a toady, which is so stupid. I can get into another, that's another episode for another day. But Bari Weiss, at the end of the day, is a Trojan horse. She is a Trojan horse into the freedom media space and the independent media space. And she's admitting that now, by the way. She was in the cool kids club. She was in the warm embraces of the mainstream media apparatus. And really all that she's been doing over the past 7 years and building up the free press and building a non-traditional independent media institution. Notice, she had a podcast called, I believe, either Honestly or Common Sense with Bari Weiss that's still out there. She still does it, I believe. And she had the free press. But she didn't do it like a podcast. She didn't build an independent media company like Megyn Kelly has built, or like Blaze Media, or like Tucker Carlson, or the Daily Wire. She built it into the most corporate style independent media ecosystem in the independent media space. So what Bari Weiss was doing was building a new ticket in to the cool kids club. She was just waiting for her opportunity, waiting for an opportunity to pounce. Only this time, this is the key word, this is the key concept, with her owning the place. So she did not own the place at the New York Times, clearly. She had to answer to, I believe, Dean Baquet was the editor back in the day. He might still be, but I know Dean Baquet was there. He didn't like Bari Weiss. And so Bari Weiss, at the end of the day, is just another plant. She's a plant. That's all she is. She is installed by herself and by our ruling class, by our elites, to push a narrative, again, because she does not believe anything that is countercultural to the narrative. Anything at all. To push a narrative inside of the independent media movement. And she's been exposed in that. And a lot of people are being exposed in that. Dave Rubin's been exposed in that. Jeremy Boring has been exposed in that. All of the rest of these independent media, quote unquote, people, they're turning out to be complete and utter frauds when it comes to actual independent media and thought. They have no diversity of opinion compared to, mainstream news sources. None whatsoever. Barry Weiss is a flaming leftist, always has been a flaming leftist. Same with Dave Rubin, same with Jeremy Boring, same with the rest of them. They're closeted leftists. They're closeted corporate media types. Dave Rubin came from the Young Turks. Jeremy Boring came from Hollywood. Barry Weiss came from the New York Times, came from the Wall Street Journal. There's nothing independent about any of these people, any of them at all. And so Barry Weiss, like much of our establishment class, is bought and paid for and has been for her whole life. And this CBS deal, which is going to be the biggest cash out in the history of independent media. I know the Daily Wire was once valued, I think, at like $1 billion, which I think is kind of nuts, but that's fine. Nothing against Daily Wire. I think Daily Wire is actually, they're way more valuable than the free press as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, I don't agree with a lot of independent journalists. But what I will say is at least they have the guts to stand on business and avoid selling out to make sure that the truth is preached. At least they do that. Barry Weiss has never done that. Barry Weiss is as establishment beholden as anybody in the media space right now. She is not independent whatsoever. And this CBS deal proves it. This is not only to get a massive payday for Barry Weiss. This is to assert a narrative controlled by her into a corporate media institution. Because if she really gets editorial control over CBS News, which I think she's going to, because Barry has the leverage in this scenario, CBS has no leverage. Barry Weiss has all the leverage here. And good for her in that sense. She did build something that's cool and something that's valuable, way more valuable than CBS News. So this is a tactic that Barry Weiss is now leveraging to become what she is always meant to be and what she's always wanted to be, an elitist, establishmentarian shill who looks down on everybody else. That's always what Barry Weiss has been. That's always what she's wanted. That's always what she's wanted. And people are acting shocked. Like I was listening to Megyn Kelly's show the other day with Glenn Greenwald talking about this. Glenn wasn't shocked, but Megyn was like, why is she doing this? She doesn't want to be like Megyn Kelly. She doesn't want to be like Glenn Greenwald or Tucker or Matt Taibbi or Glenn Beck or Nicole Shanahan or any of these other people. She wants to be like Dean Baquette. She wants to be like Jeff Zucker. She wants to be one of these highbrow, drinking an old fashioned on the Upper East Side. If Barry Weiss drinks old fashions, I don't know if she does or not. But it's like, it's just so revealing about, again, it's like high school. Barry Weiss was in the Cool Kids Club. She got kicked out of the Cool Kids Club. And now she has built her way back. She's built her reputation back and is now begging for acceptance again in the Cool Kids Club when it comes to mainstream media. And people are shocked about it, but I'm not. I'm just not. I always thought this is who Barry Weiss was. No unorthodox opinions, no non-mainstream opinions, no real challenge to power structure that is meaningful. And now she has all the leverage and all the authority in the world to do whatever the heck she wants. And good for Barry Weiss again from that sense. Good for her. But if people think this is some kind of a victory or some kind of thing that should be celebrated, I would just say be careful what you wish for. Because Barry Weiss, when she runs CBS News, is going to be no different than the people who currently run CBS News. Yeah, she'll fire a lot of people. She'll get people out of there. She'll put new journalists in. She'll install her free press people inside of there. That's fine. But when you look at it from that perspective, it's not going to change much. And CBS News is a dying organization anyway. This is where the independent media folks have a point. What is Bari Weiss trying to prove here? And that's the only conclusion I can come to. She wants to be an elite. She wants to be a shill. She wants to be an establishment important person, quote unquote, that gets invited to all the parties and does all the things that, the highbrow organizations that independent journalists don't enjoy. She's an elite. She's always been elite. And she wants to get back in that club. That's the only thing that makes sense. And that's the reason why Bari Weiss's CBS deal is happening. Someone who is not an establishment shill is Bobby Kennedy Jr., and I want to talk about that too to get more of an optimistic note after that very depressing segue into Bari Weiss. So RFK went on, speaking of the Capitol, speaking of January 6th earlier on, so he was on Capitol Hill earlier this week, late last week, at the time of this recording, about 2 weeks ago now, and it was awesome. If you guys have not seen the clips of Bobby Kennedy just nuking, carpet bombing the senators that were in that committee hearing, it was the Senate Finance Committee, which I thought was really bizarre because Bobby Kennedy runs our Health and Human Services division of the government. That's okay. That's fine. And they were asking him all these questions about vaccine. He had Elizabeth Warren screaming over in the corner and Ron Wyden and all those losers that were inside there doing all those things. And so Bobby gets in there and just blows these people up, just torches them for hours. And it was awesome. It was glorious. If you haven't seen it before, if you haven't seen the clips, look them up. It's awesome. It's truly really, really awesome stuff. And so Bobby Kennedy, he went on Capitol Hill. There was a massive overhaul at the CDC. I believe he fired the CDC director. He fired a lot of people inside of the CDC who did not want to go along with this. Apparently, there was a new vaccine schedule or something that was being debated, or recommendations from the CDC on vaccines, which everyone in that room is paid for by vaccine manufacturers, by Big Pharma, and so I wanted to just blow Bobby Kennedy to bits, and he basically made them look like horrible people, which they are, for enforcing those type of things and being in bed with Big Pharma and everything else. And good for him. Bobby Kennedy is one of the braver people I have ever seen in my life, because he was doing this before any reward was handed out. Bobby's been talking about this for a long time. I actually didn't know about Bobby up until 2021, because my friend Taylor Johnson had liked Bobby Kennedy for a long time. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like RFK Sr., who was JFK's attorney general. She's like, no, he's got a kid that's named after him. And he's this kind of guy who's challenging all these health standards and is talking about, he cleaned up the Hudson River and is doing this vaccine stuff. And I'm like, oh boy, because that was when back in the day, vaccines were basically the standard for everybody. It was, beyond the pale even to question the most remote things about vaccines, all that stuff. And so Bobby's been on this kind of crusade for his entire life, because that's what makes him so brave to me, is because there was no incentive for Bobby to do this, for him to be heterodox. He had everything to lose. His family was Democrat royalty. He was, basically invited to all the clubs, did everything else. He was, related to all these very famous people, had the gateway into any political arena he wanted to. And now he has finally crested the mountain on his thing he wanted to. I'll never forget when he was at this, he was at the Trump rally with Tucker in Arizona, where he said, I've gotten on my knees every single morning and prayed for 19 years to end the chronic disease epidemic, and God answered my prayer by sending me Donald Trump. And I thought that was when I knew, I was like, okay, he's a true believer, because Bobby had to suspend his ego with his presidential campaign, lop it onto where Trump is and throw his back behind Trump. And Trump's credit, he gave Bobby what he wanted, gave him control of Health and Human Services, and good for both of them. And so now, similar to, I think the interesting thing about Trump's cabinet for the most part is that these guys are all back alley brawlers. They're all legitimate tough guys. J.D. Vance, Pete Hegseth, Marco Rubio, the Bobby Kennedy, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino. These are all very tough guys. And so basically they put on brass knuckles and they take people to task. And this moment with RFK with the Senate Finance Committee is him giving them the beatdown that they've always deserved. And it's ringing true everywhere. People love it that he's just, again, he's putting on the brass knuckles and he's just clocking these people. Just like right hook across the face, left hook across the chin, down to the body, into the solar plexus, everything. Hitting them right where it hurts. And this is ringing home with so many people, with people that have wanted to see adjustments to this for a very, very long time. So why is this ringing home to people? Well, this is ringing home to people because the thing that Bobby is putting his finger on, the thing that he is going after is such a apparent and visceral problem, i.e. our country being sick from every level, particularly with our kids, that no one can hide it anymore. No one can say, oh, nothing to see here. There's nothing going on here, like shut up, do whatever you need to do. Like, no. This is a major, 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 major problem. And people are discovering that it's a major problem. And they are really, they're sick of it. They're very sick of it. And so our country is so clearly just devastatingly ill from a mental health perspective, from a physical health perspective, from a chronic disease perspective, from a cancer perspective, from a cardiovascular disease perspective, from everywhere. We are not doing well, especially with our kids. And it is resonating with everyone across the aisle, whether it's, the people on the right, people on the left, which is why RFK made the endorsement of Trump such a big deal. This is why I'll put this out, the Make America Healthy Again slogan, I was happy to purchase from the Kennedy shop. That's why it's such a big deal. That's why it's resonating with people. Because everyone wants healthy kids. Everyone wants a healthy country that at least, isn't a total nihilist and isn't throwing the towel in on everything else. It's not a political issue. That's, I think, where people kind of get confused about this stuff. So it's not the Maha thing. It's not a political issue. It's a spiritual issue. It's a spiritual issue. And Bobby's alluded to this before. Nicole Shanahan, who ran for his vice president, has alluded to this before, which explains why our sick culture is the thing in the first place. A sick culture is a spiritual issue. It's not just we need to get red 40 out of the food. Yes, we need to get red 40 out of the food. We need to get petroleum out of the food. Like, yes, for God's sake, like get petroleum out of our food. Like, please. But it's not the physical poison. It's the spiritual poison. The reason why a country willingly makes itself sick and why no one is stepping in to do anything about it is because we are spiritually ill from that perspective. And so I think the bigger point of this and why this is resonating with so many people is that this, the Maha thing and what Bobby Kennedy's talking about, it shows how sick our leaders are as well. And so the biggest moment of the hearing, for those who haven't watched it, I think he was talking to Ron Wyden, who's a senator from, I think, maybe New Hampshire or something. So he was talking with, Ron Wyden was talking, I don't know nothing about Ron Wyden except that I don't like him. From everything that I've heard about him, I don't like the guy. And so Ron Wyden asked Bobby a stupid question about you want to starve people of vaccines or something. And that's never what Bobby has said ever. I've listened to almost every single interview he's done. He's never said that he wants to take vaccines away from people. So he says and throws this grenade at Bobby, and Bobby just gets a baseball bat out and hits it back at him and blows him up right in front of everyone, which was great. And so what he said, the biggest moment of this was when he hits that thing, the grenade back at Ron Wyden, that the cultural sickness, the chronic disease epidemic, the explosion in autism rates, the explosion in childhood obesity, the explosion in everything that's gone wrong, happened on their watch, which it did. Elizabeth Warren was in office when this happened. Bernie Sanders, who was at that hearing, was in office when this happened. Ron Wyden was in office when this happened. They were in power when our country got sick. They allowed this to happen. They knew this was going to happen, and they wanted it to happen. Why? Because they're all in bed with the pharma companies. They're all in bed with the financial firms. They're all in bed with these corporate interests that bribe them to turn a blind eye to our country going off a cliff from a health perspective. And that's absolutely correct. And the fact that our leaders willingly steered this country into a place where we're so unhealthy that we can barely function, that 75% of our youth cannot serve in the military because they're not physically fit enough, that one in like something crazy, like I think 15 boys in California has autism, that we pushed a vaccine mandate primarily on working and middle class people on the threat of force. And if they didn't do it, they were a bad person. They were unclean. They were unvaccinated. They were, a part of the problem. Like, that's sick. That's absolutely sick. They allowed that to happen. Why? Because it kept them in their position of power and it rolled their profits. Their wallets got a lot fatter because of that issue, because of the Maha issue. So the broader point of the Bobby Kennedy hearing, of the Senate hearing, what I want people to take away from this and what I think he wanted and what I am challenging people to take away from this is that I think what this says is that we're finally getting to a point where we've had enough. We're just done with the ops. We're done with the Psyops. We're done by people saying, hey, every other kid on the playground is really obese, but we should not pay attention to that. Hey, I have 3 autistic children. It's okay. Nothing to see here. Hey, I go to McDonald's every single day and don't work out ever. It's fine. I can take a pill for that. No. Not anymore. We are tired of the obvious things being ignored for so long, like the clear decline of the health of our nation and the corruption of the health system by the massive hospital chains and the pharma companies and everything like that really have commoditized and capitalized our healthcare system. So this is giving us, I believe, a playbook with how to treat these people, these institutional people that run psyops on people, like, hey, our country's doing fine from a health perspective. No, it's not. And Bobby Kennedy carpet bombing and nuking these people on Capitol Hill shows exactly what we need to do. No quarter, no mercy. Expose it all. Kick them in the teeth. That is exactly how we should treat people when they lie to us on a systemic level. Because when they do so, they hurt people. They've hurt me, they've hurt you, they've hurt everybody. No quarter, no mercy. Expose it all. So how do we expose it all? How do we stop a psyop? That's what we're going to end with today. So psyops are the biggest tool of control, as we've seen throughout this entire episode, by our ruling class. They're the biggest open, secret, whatever, by our ruling class to control people. And the reason why they're run so often is that they themselves, meaning our leaders, are so unimpressive from every single form and facet that they need to pull off these kind of grand lies in order to keep them in check and us distracted so we don't call them out on their BS. Because the lies are so, they're flying so fast and so heavy right now that people cannot tell the difference between a lie and the truth anymore, which is why psyops are so successful, because they're run under basically the threat of saying that, hey, I don't know what's true, I don't know what's false. That's the common question, what is truth? That's what, it's funny because that's exactly what Pontius Pilate asked Jesus in John 18. It's so funny. I remember reading this in my small group, and I said this is the most 2024 chapter of Scripture I've ever read in my entire life, because Pontius Pilate asked Jesus what is truth. And then there's this angry mob outside yelling about what the truth is, like Jesus is this person, Jesus is whatever. And it's so emblematic of our cultural moment. It's really, really funny. And when Jesus tells Pilate what truth is, like Pilate can't comprehend it. He's like, what? It's like, of course he can't comprehend it. Of course he can't. So, but, however, there is a formula for defeating psyops, which you saw with Bobby Kennedy, which you've seen with some other things. And if we run this playbook, which we should, as value-driven, value-oriented people, we will win. And we will take back the narrative on these ops. So number one thing that we can do on how to stop a psyop is notice a noticeably absurd thing and call it out as such. That's how this thing starts. Hey, that doesn't make sense. Hey, that's stupid. Hey, that's dumb. That's not right. So if you notice our ruling class or people in positions of power elevating a certain thing or pointing out something that does not make sense at all or is patently absurd or is completely nonsensical, call it out. Call it out. So I heard this, I don't know who said this, but basically the saying was that the wound that causes you to scream the most when it's touched is the wound that's infected. So the louder our institutions, the louder our ruling class, our elites, they scream when you talk about something, the more that you know you're over the target. And the more that you know that they're in the wrong. Because if they were right, you have no reason to scream about it. You have no reason to be hysterical about it. This is like when U.S. aid got unmasked as a CIA front operation that they used to conduct operations with the CIA and overthrow governments and things like that, and they were funding all this wild stuff. That's why the backlash was so loud. It wasn't over people in Africa not having clear drinking water. It was that their black box budget of U.S. aid was totally ripped from them and that caused them to panic. That's why. That's why. So you notice a noticeably absurd thing and call it out as such. That's step one. Number two, don't stop talking about it. When you see the absurd thing, when you note the absurd thing, do not stop talking about the absurd thing. You bring it up over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, no matter what the resistance might be. And it's going to be loud and it's going to be fierce if you keep hammering the point. So if they scream louder and louder and louder, you've got them. You've got them. It will take everything in your power to stop, to say, hey, I don't think this is the right thing to do, whatever, but you can't. And you shouldn't. You can't fail if you don't quit. So keep talking. Keep saying the thing. This is how all psyops fall apart that we've seen. From COVID to the Israel lobby to the, to whatever, etc. So, you cannot fail if you cannot quit. Same is true with this scenario too. And more people will start to pay attention to exactly what you're talking about through the entire process. You cannot fail if you can quit. Keep talking because people will start to pay attention. Because if you talk loud enough, if you talk often enough, people will be like, oh, what's that guy talking about? What's that girl talking about? And they will be able to trace it and see, oh, wow, you're putting your thumb on the scale of this thing. And you'll be able to make that point over and over and over again. And people will start to say, oh, wow, that might be something we should look into. And then they'll scream louder. Our ruling class will. Our elites will. The people running the op will. And so the third thing, this is the one that we need to work on, I think. When the psyop falls apart, we need to punish them, the people who ran the op, so hard for it that they don't do it again. Punishment needs to happen. So when a psyop fails, you must call out, name, shame those who participated in it. So they are completely demoralized and disincentivized to ever try something like it ever again. So Jesse Kelly had a clip from his show a couple weeks ago when the whole Russiagate thing exploded. And he basically said, they're like, oh my gosh, Barack Obama's going to get thrown in jail. And Barack Obama, I guess, is protected under presidential immunity. I would think that would be the case anyway. I really don't know. I'm not that educated on Russiagate. But Jesse Kelly was so funny. He put this, he had a clip on his YouTube, and it got reposted on all of his social medias, called Not Everybody is Protected. I thought it was the funniest thing. Not everyone is protected. You can go get the head of the FBI. You can go get Comey. You can go get John Brennan. You can go get James Clapper. You can go get Andrew McCabe. Get somebody. I want one head on one pike. That's it. Hyperbolically, of course. Not going to behead James Comey. I don't want to behead James Comey. James Comey deserves to live. But I want an example. I want someone so demoralized, disincentivized, thrown in jail, whatever the case might be, And the reason is we need to set a precedent and an example that it's not okay to lie to people. It's not okay to lie, particularly when you're in a position of power and authority over important things. If you're a parent, you know this, by the way. Punishment matters. You shouldn't be vindictive about it. You shouldn't, spank your kid 1,000,000 times or ground him for 7 years. But punishment matters. You can't be vindictive about it. You can't be retributive about it. But justice is a thing, and justice needs to be served. And it must be served to people who run psyops on other people. It must be served. Because if it isn't, then we don't live in a free society. We just don't. And we haven't been, which is why these ops have been continuing to be run. So if you want a free country, a fair country, a just country, punishment must be handed down. Or else people will do whatever they want. And we will continue to get the same thing of what we've gotten, and we'll deserve it because we haven't done anything different. Thank you all for watching. Own the day. Open your mind. See you next week.